Hey folks, I'm Jarrod Hardke, Rice Extension Agronomist with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Welcome to episode number 2 of Rice and Advice. I'm currently standing in a field up here in Lawrence County, Arkansas, really close to the Craighead County line actually, but we're out here having a look at a particular farmer problem. Got a call last night this morning and had a few questions about obviously some sickly looking rice. That's usually why I do get the call, is something doesn't look right. And so with a couple of phone calls, a few text messages sent with pictures, had a pretty good idea what we were coming to have a look at, but it's always better to have that look in person just to verify what's going on, and that what we think might be happening is the only thing that's going on in a particular field. So with that, we're going to have a little bit of a closer look at what's going on in this field, and hopefully kind of circle back around not only to what we can see, what's going on, but what maybe we can or cannot do about it. It's easy to find instances of healthy rice as you follow down the drill row, but it's also pretty easy to move just down from that and find a mixture of sick or dying rice along with very healthy rice, which may or may not end up being infected. One easy way that we can look at some of this rice to observe it, whether it's seedling disease or something else going on, is obviously this uneven pattern of healthy and sick or dying plants kind of intermingled with one another, but also we can dig some of this rice up and look for the symptoms at or below the soil surface as to what may actually be going on. Here we have a nice series of rice plants in a row, all displaying symptoms of seedling disease. Could be Pythium, could be Rhizoctonia. Most likely it's Pythium, but we can easily dig those plants up all the way down to the seed and actually have a look. One of those telltale signs that we can look at. It's pretty easy to pick out even at this distance, but you can see that brown line surrounding that plant at about the midpoint. That was exactly where this plant was in contact with the soil surface, and that's what led to the disease infection on this seedling, ultimately resulting in death. Now we can take a brief look through a hand lens and see that infection point up close, though slightly shaky, holding it with my hand. You can see where that infection point occurred. Now, if something else had happened to this seedling, say herbicide injury or something else, you're not likely to see this infection point at the soil line, though at times we can have complicating factors where more than one thing is responsible for what happened to this rice. So one interesting thing to note at times is we all feel very protected by our seed treatments that we put on our rice seed. And certainly they provide a lot of pretty cheap, valuable insurance to the crop. But in certain situations like we've encountered here, where really it's just the right recipe of mild temperatures, cool enough that the rice isn't really growing, but warm enough that the fungi and seedling disease are in fact active, is really just kind of the wrong combination. And then add in the fact that we've had some of these heavy splashing rainfall events. That's just providing more and more opportunity for infection, is a large reason for how we got here. This particular field was planted about April 2nd, emerged to a stand about 2 weeks later, around April 15th, somewhere in there. Certainly, you know, that's been up for just a little bit now, but not a great deal of progress. Certainly the rice has been growing, but a lot of sitting still at this point. So we certainly know what the conditions have been over the past 10 days of several heavy rainfall events. Mild temperatures, some days warm, close to 80 over the past few, but again, not so hot that necessarily that the rice was outrunning the seedling disease, and especially in those early days when it was just barely out of the ground was when it was probably the most held back by high temperatures in the 60s and maybe the 70s if we were lucky at that point in time. So we can lean on those fungicide seed treatments for about 14 days or so to get our rice out of the ground, more or less. Once it's up and out of the ground, it's kind of at the mercy of being able to grow off and outrun anything that's trying to attack it. That fungicide seed treatment is not really going to be successful beyond that point for the above ground growth, which is why you do a lot of times get into these situations where you see that infection at the soil line and above. And in some cases, not particularly this one, where we see a lot more ponded water, that's the other scenario where we see a lot of seedling disease infection. So something to keep an eye on. Very cheap, very good insurance, but every now and then it's still not going to be sufficient to keep the stand that we would like to have. But even in this field, we still may have plenty of a stand to maximize yield and make a very, very good economical crop that we don't need to attempt to replant in this scenario. One other important point to make anytime we're talking about disease issues is often residue. In this field, there are a lot of winter weeds still present. They did receive a burn down application, but that occurred after planting. Some are still making it, some are not. Some of the additional things you can see when you have a look around, those are not this year's rice rows. That would be residue from last year's. This is a no-till rice field. So some of that residue present in the field can be harboring some of the disease that we're dealing with now. That's something that we generally want to avoid. Certainly wasn't a fall or even spring scenario where we could do much residue management in a no-till or conservation tillage situation. So we're doing the best we can, but that may be part of what's going on in this situation, having a greater instance of seedling disease pressure here where we are no-till, and in some cases still have a pretty good amount of rice residue around. So after having a look around and being able to confirm at least visually that we do seem to be dealing with the seedling disease issue out here, again, this seed was treated with a fungicide package in addition to insecticide, so everything was essentially done that could be done on this field to try to ensure that we achieved a proper stand. Now, the stand jury is certainly still out. We're still in a little bit of a wait and see mode with the existing seedlings and where we're going to go. It still looks like we're probably going to have a sufficient stand that we're going to want to keep it, particularly from an economic standpoint. But we do have to keep in mind, once we've reached this point, there's really not a lot we can do from a management standpoint. We have to hope for a little bit better weather. Who knows when that's going to occur, but being a little bit warmer, maybe catch a break in some rain, get a little bit more consistent sunshine, and have this rice grow off, then we're probably going to be in good shape. The other option would be, and many often consider, well, maybe I can just throw some fertilizer at it and really solve this issue. That's really not likely at this time. Most of our research has shown that when you're dealing with rice this small, that's less than the 2 full true leaf stage, simply put, where you can see 2 actual leaf collars. Prior to that time, you're still mostly living off of the seed. So any fertilizer that you try to fly on at this point, maybe get incorporated by the rain or flush, probably not going to flush here, but hope on that next rainfall, is really going to go underutilized by the plant. Not saying it won't eventually get some of it, but we're probably going to see a lot more loss before the plant's actually large enough to take it up. So the advice in this situation is, number one, to kind of wait on and hope for better conditions. It's still a little too damp to do much of anything if we wanted to right now, such as a replant, and we're not in that mode yet. There's still enough rice, but we don't want to consider that just yet. But the other part is, on a loamier type soil, we generally don't see much of an early season kind of starter fertilizer type response. It may green it up, but not a lot of growth. But this is one situation with a reduced stand that we really want to do anything we can to speed this rice growth beyond that of the seedling disease that's attempting to work on it and slow it down. So this is one scenario where I would potentially consider making an application of ammonium sulfate or DAP, or even a blend of those two, something to really get some nitrogen out here, but again, not just yet. Really need to get through kind of the rainfall that's expected here through the end of this week into the next one, get to 2 full leaves, and if it still looks like we need to give it a bump, then fly something on then, probably ahead of another rain that may or may not be coming. In other situations, if you're not expecting a rain, then certainly if you're going to fly it on, you're going to have to flush. But that's really the only option, and that's not really guaranteed a positive net return off that application, but it could possibly help you salvage the remaining stand by outrunning any remaining seedling disease battle that you have going on. Ultimately, any improvement in the weather, sunlight, and just general temperature improvement is going to be the biggest driver in the success of this eventual rice crop. Still high hopes, but something to look out for. Not something we deal with a lot anymore, but something to be aware of as we look around out here with what's going on in our rice fields. With still a lot of the state's rice left to plant, let's hope for better weather conditions as we kind of move forward. Remember to keep that seed treated. I think most already have, but this shows we can still run into unexpected conditions where they really do pay off. We're probably going to be able to keep this field we're in because we have the seed treated. Otherwise, we might not have any stand left to come back to. So everybody have good luck out there. We'll hope things turn off for the better here this week. And that's it for the second episode of Rice and Advice. See you out there.